The first English settlement in America had been established in 1607, and by 1616 there had been lots of ups and downs, lots of changes there, lots of interactions with the native Indians. But what the people there wanted was more settlers. People were frightened then to go across the sea to a strange land, as they saw it, where there were strange people. And so what happened was that Pocahontas came over with her husband almost as a PR exercise, an advert for settlers to go to America and to start a new life there. And so she came with her husband, and they went to see the King and the Queen at Hampton Court, which was where they were, on the River Thames, and they met all sorts of people on their journey who might be those who would encourage others to take the risk and go on that voyage to America, to what they saw as the New World. Pocahontas was the daughter of Powhatan, a great chief among the Native Americans at that time, and she was reputed to be his favourite daughter. And as the Native Americans began to interact with the new settlers, what happened was that there were disputes and there were arguments and conflicts. And as a result of that, one particular leader of the English, called Captain John Smith, was captured, and he was threatened with execution, and execution in a particularly brutal way, by having his head beaten in with a stone. And Pocahontas felt sorry for him. And so she threw herself across him and said to her father, "Father, if you're going to kill this man, first you have to kill me." And so that was the beginning, really, of a relationship between Pocahontas and the English, and all sorts of things happened, including the fact that she was kidnapped by the English and held for ransom. But in the end, Pocahontas didn't marry Captain John Smith, as some people thought she might have done. He was injured and came back to England. And in the end, Pocahontas married Captain John Rolfe, another settler, and together they had a son. And we know that Pocahontas came to England. She came to be an advert for her people. And it was on the way back to America that she was sailing, that off Gravesend she'd been taken ill and she died. And the story goes that Pocahontas was brought ashore and she was laid to rest in this church. Although it wasn't this particular church, it was the church that was built on this site before it. And Pocahontas died in 1617, and as I say, laid to rest here in Gravesend at St George's Church. I think that the story of Pocahontas is a fascinating one, because our relationship with America as a country goes back many, many centuries now. And it's always been, I've found, a really interesting story. And so this story of how the original relationships between the English and the Native Americans developed has always been one that's held a great deal of fascination for me. And I think that when I came here as rector to learn that Pocahontas was very much associated with the church, because as you go around the church you see various things that are reminders of Pocahontas and what she means to the people here in Gravesend. I think that the particular thing that really caught my imagination was the way in which Pocahontas served as a person of reconciliation, that it was she who worked hard for reconciliation between her people and the English. And so I think that it's as that person of reconciliation, something that we all ought to try to be in life. People who don't war, who don't argue, but seek to find a common way. I think that that's why I find her a particular figure of enormous significance in the history of English-American relationships. She's an agent of reconciliation. I mean by that when her people and the English were in conflict with one another, when things really didn't go very well, she was the one who encouraged them to make peace with one another. She was the one who really acted as the person who could get them together, to see where they could go together. And I think that that's something that all of us can do. We can all be agents of reconciliation. We can all be people who encourage one another to get on well with one another, rather than having to sort things out by fighting and conflict and war. I learned most about Pocahontas when I came here as rector to St. George's. Before then, I'd heard of Pocahontas, but really she was just a figure in history. And it's amazing how alive she is to so many people here in Gravesend, but also in America. We have very real connections with America, such as through our town twinning with Chesterfield County in Virginia, and also with Jamestown, which was that first settlement that was developed in America by the English. And so the relationship goes on, and I think that that's a really worthwhile thing to have. Pocahontas is somebody who brings people together, and we all need to bring people together, because rather than fighting one another, being in conflict with one another, it's important that we learn to get on together with people who don't come from the same background as we do, from people who are different from ourselves. And I think that that's something that's really worth learning about Pocahontas.